Welcome to the Mo podcast.
A place where individual stories come to life.
This is how we need to be communicating with people. This is how we support people's personal development.
It's important to speak about people believing in people.
The more you're able to let go of your limitation, the more you step into your power, your inner authentic power.
Mo, a place for me, others, everyone. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Mo Podventures. Now in today's episode we've got a really exciting conversation between Robin Chu and Darren, and they will be discussing some really interesting topics around the education system and what we can do to support the education system and what Robin has done in his journey as a social entrepreneur. He talks a little bit about the pitfalls, the failures, the lessons that he learned along the way, and also reflects on how much he has made a difference. We really hope that you enjoy it and buckle in for a fantastic episode.
So, welcome to the Mo Foundation podcast, or Pod Adventure as I'm calling it, because podcast just sounds so ordinary. Today I'm really pleased to have Robin on the call with me, and Robin is somebody that got involved with Mo many years ago. I can't even remember when it was, so I'm looking forward to finding out when that was. And he has gone on to create a wonderful organisation, and he's the CEO and founder of CoachBright. So really looking forward to kind of finding out more about that. So Robin, welcome to the Pod Adventure.
Delighted to be here, Darren. And yeah, Pod Adventure rather than podcast. I think that makes it sound so much more inviting. I can't wait.
So, Robin, you know, this is for the Mo community, which is, or Mo family, as people like to call it, which is lovely. And I always feel a bit strange saying that because I don't want it to sound like it's some sort of weird cult, because it really isn't. But, and I don't think it necessarily means that, but it's quite funny. But, you know, you tell us about you. Tell us where you grew up, first off. Let's start there.
Yeah. So before I forget, Darren, it was 2015. I think I joined Mo. So I grew up in the southeast, in a little village, little town called Wokingham near Reading. So in Berkshire, and I think what's really important to say about kind of growing up. So my parents are owners of a local Chinese takeaway, and that was really kind of the start that I remember in life, really, that every kind of Friday, Saturday, because mum and dad would work, right? Mum would work on the counter and dad would work in the kitchen as the chef. I would in terms of kind of childcare, I would have to kind of sit kind of underneath the counter. There was this little kind of archway bit that kind of hid me, and I kind of sat kind of there playing on my Game Boy, I think, if you remember that, was kind of my childhood, and that was how I spent kind of a lot of time, really, in that kind of Chinese takeaway and kind of staying there. And then I think in terms of this podcast, it reminded me of kind of moments, kind of transition moments, kind of key moments in life. I think a really big one for me was going to university. So at the age of 18, I was the second in my family to go to university. My brother was the first, and I went to the University of Exeter, way down in the southwest, which was a good 3.5 hour drive away, which my mum, never stopped telling me how far away it was. You've chosen almost the furthest away point to go. And that was, Darren, I think one of the most kind of eye-opening, life-changing moments of my life. And the reason I say that is, it's really important to say, kind of early doors, right at the start of this pod adventure, that university changed me. It kind of made me who I am, really. It gave me so much confidence, so much discovery as to who I am and who I want to be. I think, no doubt, there's no way I'd be doing this with you now if I hadn't have gone to university. But also it taught me something else, which is the friends and people I was interacting with were very different than the people that my parents interacted with on a Friday and Saturday night in the takeaway. I think Exeter University is not known for its diversity and not known for its disadvantaged kind of communities. And I very quickly found myself in a very different environment than the one that my kind of parents knew, and that has always kind of stayed with me as I've kind of grown into my kind of 20s. I'm 29 now, but in my in my first job, and this kind of neatly links back to 2015 and Mo, and why Mo was another kind of life changing moment for me. But in my first job, I had a coach, and this kind of will resonate with the Mo family really. I had a coach, and like everyone else, I thought coaching was. I had this kind of 40-year-old guy came, and I thought he would kind of tell me the answer, the secret to life, the secret to how to be successful in my career in a startup at the time. And obviously it was not that at all. It was just a lot of listening, a lot of frank conversation, a lot of him allowing me space to discover who I am and what I stood for and what I care about, and what's stopping me from doing that. And that led to the wonderful thing of 2014, which was the birth of Coach Bright, which was um, after discovering what coaching was, I thought, wow, this amazing thing that only exists in elite sport and still back then kind of big business, executive business, that's kind of senior leadership level. How can we take this idea and apply it to a completely different context, which is serving schools in really deprived and really disadvantaged areas, um, which really kind of for me stood out from my time at university. It's being coming from a completely different community to the one that I was in at Exeter. And that really was the birth of Coach Bright in 2014, is let's take coaching away from the kind of corporate world and apply the best of coaching to supporting young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to achieve their best. And that's kind of where my head's been for the last 7 years, if you believe it, Darren. 7 years Coach Bright's been running, and undoubtedly the kind of other stepping stone on that was joining Mo at 2015 and actually learning how to be a coach and surrounding myself with far better people than myself. And with all that, I was so glad that you asked me to come and speak, and yeah, can't wait to get into it.
Wonderful, Robin. So, just want to just reel back just a bit because I think it's really fascinating. So, did either of your parents go to university?
No, neither of my parents went. So both my parents are from Hong Kong, and they left Hong Kong young. I think my mum left when she was 15. My dad left when he was 17, 18. But that was really their education history, really. They kind of left school at those ages, and they what you would call the school of life, really. They just kind of started working. They worked in kind of restaurants and takeaways throughout their entire life, in West Germany at the time, actually. And then they moved over to England. And then they got to the position where they owned their own takeaway. But yeah, the world of university and lecturers and seminars and all that kind of language and vocabulary was completely outside the grasp of my parents.
No, that's and the reason I want to ask that is because when we get into Coach Bright and the wider system that you're creating, I want to dive into that, because one of the things I'm fascinated with is what stimulus you get from parents. Because the stimulus I got growing up was "you will work" from my dad, and then my mum's was "you will love and travel." It was great, go and see the world, sort of thing. But there wasn't any focus. I didn't even know what university was, Robin. So just wondering where, because you said your brother was the first, and then you went. I don't know if there's any more siblings. So I was just curious as to what was your parents' sort of messaging around education and the importance of it.
Yeah, I mean, there was no doubt in our household that education was the silver bullet, really. And even though, and that's quite interesting, because even though my parents never really achieved anything academically in terms of their qualifications, they saw education as a way to better yourself and to reach your kind of potential beyond your kind of current circumstances. And that was kind of drilled into us at a really early age, the idea of, look, if you work hard and you do well, then things will follow, and then after that you might be able to think about your passions and where you want to go. And I think that kind of mentality of working hard and education being a silver bullet, I still hold true to today. And despite that, and there are many, despite the many flaws of the UK education system, I think when done right, education can be the thing that can lift you out of poverty, can be the thing that can lift you out of a really challenging situation. Um, and there's no doubt, my mum especially, she kind of grounded me in that for all her love, kindness, and compassion, that was the real lesson, really, that if you work hard, then you can go on to achieve what you want. And I think that obviously applies in school life, but I think obviously just generally as well.
Yeah, no, I'm struck, and also I'm struck by because quite often with parents, and being one of three young daughters, I'm sort of semi-conscious, but without being nerdy or strange with it, is that quite often it's our behaviours that they watch, not what we say. It's what we do. And I'm struck by the story of you sitting there with your Game Boy underneath the counter as your parents worked, front counter and in the kitchen. That what did that teach you about that hard work, that persistence, that entrepreneurial spirit?
Absolutely, and I think that entrepreneurial spirit is the main one. That look, when you're the owner of a small business, as you know, Darren, it's kind of the as my parents were, right? It is the kind of life and soul of what you do. It kind of grounds every conversation, every thought that you have in so many ways, because you care so much about it. And you could see that in the way that, where I was sat, I had direct line of sight to the way that my mum would interact with every single customer on a Friday and Saturday night. And as you can imagine, the people that would come into a Chinese takeaway on Friday, Saturday night really vary, from young families to people doing shift work to people who are going to have just come back from the pub. And she had an amazing way to build rapport, build relationships, and to interact with every single one of them, to the point where you would see customers come in who were the usual suspects, and she would have their order for them before they even got to the counter. She'd be like, "Oh, yeah, we've yeah, this is what you want, isn't it?" And then it's already cooking in the background. And I mean, that taught me a lot about she didn't have to do that. We've all been into restaurants where the staff aren't that bothered and they don't really care, and you can tell, and that's fine, right? But she made a conscious effort every single day to turn up and to do her job well, and to make people feel like they were cared for. And a Saturday night in a Chinese takeaway is a busy environment. The phones are ringing all the time. There are sometimes people, well, pre-COVID, people queuing outside the door, but she still managed to maintain that sense of composure and putting the customer first. And that kind of, while I was sat there, pushing my buttons on the Game Boy, I think probably subconsciously I learned something there about, look, you got to treat people well. You got to work hard for what you want, and all those lessons. While I wasn't actively doing it because I was 8, 9, 10 years old, I think I kind of saw just through what was happening.
Yeah, no, 100%. And then just to pick up one more question in that area. So you talked about people coming from deprived areas. So the area that you grew up, I don't know it. So was your school in a deprived area? Where does that passion for supporting people that are in deprived areas come from?
Yeah, so it wasn't with me, actually. I think that is important to say. So I ended up going to a private school called Wellington College, which was in the kind of local area, and that again speaks to that. All the money that my mum and dad had, they essentially invested in me, and kind of sending me to private school, and doing that, and that belief that education is the silver bullet. And that was always a strange one, in that school was very confusing in a lot of ways. I didn't particularly enjoy it. I didn't particularly, well, I got lots out of it, sure, but I didn't particularly have a happy experience there. And I think part of that was just that culture clash of the people I was interacting with were very different than the people that I knew in my kind of home and family life. Um, and I think that, and I think as importantly, that kind of university bit, that I think something really stood out for me at university, which is I really questioned that idea of if you work hard, you kind of get what you want, essentially. That how could that be the case when the people here all come from a certain kind of affluent type of background, essentially? And you know, that I still think about that today. Really, is the answer just is working hard enough? And I think there's a bit of nuance there. That yes, I think maybe on an individual level it plays a part, but there are also big system-wide challenges that still now in 2021, if you're born poor, you're likely to stay poor, and if you're born rich, you're likely to stay rich. And there's loads of kind of research and stats that back that up. And I think that was the thing that really struck me going to university, which is there's a degree of look, some people have just been dealt a better hand here, and
Mhm.
we need to play a part in leveling that playing field. Or like, I felt a strong sense of we need to create a fairer system. We need to create a fairer education system because there are so many young people where talent isn't the issue. You know, it's like they are trapped in a system that doesn't help them. And um, if we can play a part in kind of helping them on an individual level of embodying more responsibility, more independence, all of that, then we might have a shot of kind of making education and therefore society much fairer. So yeah, for me, it was really that kind of personal university starkness that kind of struck a chord with me.
So then, so you finish university, and I know Exeter because the mum of two of ours, so Annalisa and Agnes, so she went to Exeter, so I know it. I know a little bit about that sort of background. Never been there myself, but so I kind of get a sense of some of the things you've said there, and I'll skirt over some of the things that I also think implicit in what you were sharing about your school life, because I don't necessarily know if we need to kind of focus on that, but just conscious. Yeah, I mean, cultural difference and things like that was sort of coming to my mind as I was listening to your experience, and maybe that will come out at some point. But so you finished university. What did you study at university?
I studied history and politics,
Yeah.
which is obviously very confusing for my parents, Darren, because they were like, "What career are you going to get out of history and politics?" And the answer is obviously a social entrepreneur, which doesn't help. But yes, history
Yeah.
and politics.
So what year is it? You come out of university. What year?
It was in the barnstorming year of 2012. So if I bring you
Yeah.
back to Usain Bolt and the London 2012
Yeah.
Olympics, it was that year where
Yeah.
the whole country seemed to be united around the Olympics. And yeah, so after that, I actually something I haven't mentioned is I've got another passion which is sport. So
Hmm.
I for a 9-month period I was a sport producer for BBC Radio Berkshire. So I can give you all the niche knowledge about Reading Football Club 2012-2013 season when they got promoted to the Premier League. But yeah, that's what I did straight out of university, and then after that, I worked for an organisation called Year Here, which is a social leadership scheme. And then after that, I did Coach Bright. So it's all pretty short and snap, really.
Yeah, no, that's great, and you're starting to join the dots that I wanted to sort of connect. And I think in terms of your knowledge, I think that's probably a very small niche, Robin, that we're talking about there that would be interested in those results. But that let's not get into that either. So at what point, in your journey, whether it was at university or it was when you came out in 2012 and joined Year Here, the social leadership, at what point did this sort of idea start really germinating, or was it germinating a lot longer before that? That point of actually, what I'd love to bring to the world is to be a social entrepreneur.
Um, no, Darren, definitely not. I mean, well, it's hard to say because I guess we do join the dots backwards, right? But
Mm.
I'm definitely not someone who wanted to run my own business or wanted to do that. I think, I almost feel like I accidentally fell into Coach Bright, and ironically now would not do anything else. But I think undoubtedly throughout school and university, I felt a sense of, and whether that was as big as educational disadvantage, I felt a sense of injustice or life not being fair for certain groups of people. I think that um came from my own experiences at school and university, and I think that kind of struck me. But I think that the trigger was really learning about the idea and practice of coaching. So at year here, I had an executive coach, and I think what really struck me about coaching was that there is such high trust and such a high belief in the individual in front of you is whole and will ultimately figure out the answer, will ultimately kind of get to the solution they need to get to by themselves. Yes, with some prompting, yes, with some questioning, yes, with some deep reflecting and introspection, but ultimately they're the ones that are going to figure it out. And I just found that so powerful. I mean, so powerful for me personally, in that it taught me so much about I'm the barrier to my own success, but also so much in that it was so different than the education and to a degree the parenting that I kind of grew up with as well, where the culture had been very much of, experts know best, and to kind of tell to you were just given instruction, and your job was to implement those instructions, and to do that actually this idea that an individual has power and autonomy and an ability to decide for themselves what they want, and how to get there. I just found that fascinating, and I found that especially in the context of what we're talking about, supporting communities where a lot of the time the kind of very traditional narrative is, communities are lazy or don't want to get on, or all of that, which obviously is ridiculous. I always thought coaching was just such a great way to activate people's innate, passions and innate desires and innate kind of potential, really. So that trigger of having a coach, I think, was really illuminating. But I don't think it would have led to Coach Bright if it wasn't for the personal experiences I had gone through at university and school, undoubtedly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So 2014, you have the kind of idea is born, and Coach Bright is born. So how did that start?
That started in so the idea was born, and it's important to say that there isn't one kind of particular moment. It was talking to loads of different people. For example, Anton, who really well, played a really big part at the start, and others like Juan, who was at Student Funder at the time, played a really big part. So kind of surrounding myself with people who were far more entrepreneurial, far more creative, and just being in their presence really and having conversations with them played a big part. And then the first kind of tangible moment was we did a pilot at a school in South London in Elephant and Castle, and it was with 10 pupils. And I have never prepared or worked as hard, Darren, for that moment. I think it was on a Wednesday afternoon, and it was abysmal. And we had a program down for I think 6 weeks, and each week there were less young people came each week. And this was meant to be the grand, we're coaching is going to change the way we see education. This was a 22-year-old me who thought that I had all the answers, and coaching was the way to do it, and we were going to right the wrongs of the education system. And it just didn't work. Well, it didn't work in part. So some pupils loved it. Some pupils found the idea of, what do you want? What do you hope to achieve after school? Where do you want to go? They loved that kind of big picture, abstract, almost philosophical way of approaching something. And then the majority just found it too big. They just didn't quite understand the purpose and the point of it. And they were like, look, I'm struggling in maths, and I'm not doing very well at biology. I don't know why you're talking to me about where I want to be when I'm 25. And they didn't get it. And that was such a fascinating realization that we couldn't just take from coaching from the world of business and just essentially apply that into school. We had to create our own way of doing it, our own way of taking the best bit of coaching from business and applying it into the context that we're talking about. But really, that moment in 2014 when you set yourself up for this shiny pilot, and then it all kind of comes crashing down on you. That was a great lesson in learning from failure. I think of, look, it's never gonna the idea that you had in your head is probably never going to be the same in reality. And there's beauty in that, and there's learning in that, and that's great. And in fact, we still work with that school now, funnily enough, kind of 7 years on. But yeah.
So the sort of lofty ambitions, the philosophy, and the reality of life collide.
Absolutely. And you'll know this, having worked with yourself at Mo, but kind of working with kind of small businesses and even big businesses, is that you can have a presentation and you can have a wonderful PowerPoint, but really it's when you test it in a workshop, or in in the app that you've made, or whatever it is, that you kind of see the proof in that. Is it actually any good? And in our case, it was far from it at the time.
That's a lovely story, and a good lesson for other people that are sort of maybe at that stage as well, where they've just had something crash and burn, or actually just not turn out quite as they'd anticipated. And it will talk to sort of persistence and learning from those moments, I think, as well. So you've tested an elephant and castle in the school. That's not quite gone to plan. So what was the next step?
The next was that overriding feedback of there was something there, that it wasn't that coaching was a write-off and all of that. There was something there in that the pupils did enjoy space and time to think about who they were and what they wanted to do. But the bit that was missing was context. Really, it was too big picture. So the kind of main lesson there was we had to relate what coaching was to that 15-year-old, which, to be honest, would be their kind of subject specific challenges. So actually how they were doing in maths, English, and science. And that's kind of stayed the course of time, really, which is now the way our coaching programs are set up, is that yes, it is coaching, but it is geared in the space of kind of maths, English, and science at kind of GCSE level, and for A level it's for A level. So it is still very much about listening first, getting the learner to figure out the answer for themselves, and challenging them to feel that that struggle of learning, of not knowing yet. But it's all grounded in the subject, because that's the kind of reality that the pupils know, right? That's kind of where the focus is. So that was the bit that the lesson that was really learned in 2014 was we have to ground the experiences in the reality of the young people that we're working with. And that's what we did. And after Elephant Castle, we worked with two other schools in London, one in West London in kind of Harlington area, and then another in East London. And that experience, so the one in Harlington was particularly interesting because that was one of those like pure joy moments, Darren, in that the head teacher, and again, this was a kind of 22-year-old me who had, just dreamt up this idea and, was on a wing and a prayer, really. But this head teacher said yes to the program, and amazingly said yes to paying for the program. And we so while our first pilot was kind of unpaid, our kind of second work was paid, and they paid £1,000 at the time. And that was, I remember leaving that meeting and calling my partner, and it was raining, but it was almost a scene out of a movie, in that I was so happy. It was almost kind of dancing on the streets of Harlington. So if someone was videoing it, they would have thought I was absolutely mad. That the fact that there was actual validation that, look, a head teacher was willing to kind of part with her budget to really go with our work. I mean, I just felt so proud in that moment. And obviously the beauty of charging, which I've learned now, is it also forces you to up your game. It also forces you to, look, you've got to deliver now. It's not a case of you can now mug them off. You actually have to like do really good work and then stay in that school. And that kind of, that's what we did. Well, that's what I think we did. And that's kind of where we've been going for the last kind of 6-7 years. Yeah, and that was just such a wonderful moment, really.
So we'll go on to that journey in a minute, and I'll get you to sort of bring us up to speed, and then we'll work backwards actually. So Mo, you discovered Mo 2015. You said, is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
So how did our lives collide, or how did Mo's life and your life collide?
So I got introduced to Mo through my friend Anton at the time, who helped me kind of set up Coach Bright. And I remember going and you know when you have a moment when I think I'm broadly quite an optimistic, glass half full person anyway, but I think you have moments when you realize that I don't really believe in stuff like universes colliding and any of that, but but you have a moment when you're like, this just speaks to everything I've been seeking, or this speaks to kind of who I want to be and where I want to go. And I remember it was James and Denny were the lead trainers at the time. And James is great, but Denny is a professional. Denny is amazing. And just the way that she carried some of the kind of demo sessions, kind of coaching sessions at the at the top of the workshop where we would all watch, I was just like, this is incredible, that you can hold a room like this with teaching them about how to listen, teaching them about how to actually pause and allow for silence and ask kind of questions and then sit with the uncomfortableness of the person not knowing the answer. I just found it absolutely incredible, because obviously I had coaching, so I'd experienced it on the other side, but I think there's something about being a recipient and you don't really know what's going on, and then when you actually peel back the curtain and you can see this is how the process is constructed. It taught me so much about, yes, where Coach Bright is going and all of that, but also it taught me so much about we are missing so much of this in the way that we interact day to day. Like, we can uncover so much about people if we give them the time and the space to just be and to really kind of talk. And that was groundbreaking, really. And obviously some of the people on that course and some of the trainers on that course, like Jeffrey and others, I'm still in touch with now. But that was really kind of, while I had coaching before and I thought it was a great idea, that moment with Mo really encapsulated, look, I'm on the right path here, and look, there are actual people who do this for a living and are fantastic at it. And my aim is just to be half as good as people like Denny, and to be half as good as that. And I think the other thing that struck me about the Mo training was just the kind of wraparound service of, obviously it was geared by people who were super kind, and obviously it was geared by people who were super compassionate and able to do that. And that was kind of just felt throughout the entire process. And internally in the Coach Bright team, we talk a lot about relationships matter and how you come across to people matter. And it almost speaks to a bit of kind of linking the dots of how my mum was with customers back in the day. How you treat people and how you interact kind of really counts. And I definitely felt that in the kind of Mo calls. I remember turning up on day one, and I'm an introvert by heart, Darren, so I was quite meek and quiet, kind of on the sidelines. And small moments like Denny sitting me down and checking in at the start of day 3 and stuff like that, really mattered and really kind of played a part, really. So yeah, fantastic, and loved it all round.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And the other difference there is that actually what we're talking about, because some people will come into Mo for different reasons, is that what you went through was the Mo certified coach training, wasn't it? So you were actually learning the philosophy, the skills, the capabilities, the tools of how you become a great coach yourself, and how you use coaching, not necessarily just to become a coach, but actually to use it as a transferable life skill. And is the other thing, just to check in, so do your team also come through the Mo coaching as well?
They do, yes. So we've been a bit slack with it this year, but I try and make sure every year. So we're a team of 16 now, but every year, our kind of staff team all go through the Mo, exactly that, the kind of 5-day coach training course. And that's because, yes, we are a coaching company, and yes, we do that. But I think also it speaks to that coaching isn't just about if you want to become an accredited coach. I think it actually can, if you learn it well, shape how you have conversations and shape how you are. And I think one of the areas that we talk about coaching quite a lot in the Coach Bright team is, how do you interact with head teachers? How do you build sales for next year, and how do you do that? And a lot of it, I would argue, is just coaching. Really, is just actually, can you listen well? Can you provide a space for the individual to truly share what they're concerned about and what they really want? And if you can do that, then you're pretty much going to be in a good place for any sort of conversation you need to have, really. So yes, it kind of transfers across not just myself, but our entire kind of staff team. I know some of our kind of volunteer university students, they've also gone in the Mo course. So and also kind of fellow kind of partners and social entrepreneurs, we've kind of provided introductions to Mo as well. So kind of stretches across our community as well.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful, and completely agree. When I foolishly got up in January 2012 and said, look, we want to create this thing at that time called Ministry of Entrepreneurship, not really knowing what I was trying to do or what the next step really was. But what we were clear was that we wanted to give the gift of coaching to as many people as possible and to take money off the table. Because I think it's just such an essential to the points you're raising about how you listen, how you create space, how you truly listen, how you truly spend time in another person's world and forget your own inner landscape and be with them. I think they're absolutely fantastic skills. So our aim from a Mo perspective was never to create lots of coaches. That was never the aim. It's been a wonderful byproduct, and we're very proud of that community. And we're equally proud of all the other people that have not gone on to become executive, professional, life, leadership, personal, marketing, whatever type of coach you want to become. A whole load of people have just used it as part of their life and improved their lives, their families' lives, and just, hopefully use it for the long play, which was always part of the ambition. So I think it's good to kind of talk to that, because it talks to a lot of things that you're talking about, actually, about being a decent human being and the love and the compassion that you saw your mum demonstrating to every person that came into the Chinese on a weekend. So bring us up to speed. So we've not spoken for some time. I think the last time you and I caught up was a webinar with the AC, which was probably 3 years ago now, maybe 2.5 years ago. So bring me up to speed and bring us all up to speed on where is Coach Bright right now in terms of the size of the team. You just mentioned there's 16 of you, which is just incredible. But paint that picture of what's been created with the wonderful team that you've created and how many schools you're supporting. What's in the kind of Coach Bright ecosystem.
So it's we're now in year 7, if you can believe it, from 2014, and we are, so first and foremost, the kind of crucial tenets of, we're a social mobility organization. Coaching is at the heart of what we do. We want to help young people from disadvantaged backgrounds become more independent, more resilient, so they can lead the lives they want. That kind of has all held true since the days we started, really. And now we've been quite lucky in quite a luxurious position during COVID, in that we have grown. So we're now a team of 16, soon to be 17. And this academic year, we're supporting just over 2,000 plus pupils across 60 odd secondary and primary schools up and down the country. So our work kind of stretches from the kind of southwest, kind of Exeter, Plymouth, Cornwall area, to London and the southeast, to also the West Midlands, kind of Birmingham and surrounding areas there. And what's been really amazing about that journey is we're only just getting started, really, Darren, in a lot of ways. That this year we're turning over just over £650,000. I think next year we're looking to go over 1 million and to double that. And that is in line with, ultimately for us, it's about how many young people we can support from disadvantaged backgrounds. And the aim really is to get to a stage where we're in kind of 10%, 5 to 10% of kind of UK secondary schools. We're at the moment in I think 2% by last count, but the aim is to get to kind of 10% of UK secondary schools, while maintaining the quality of our work. I think that's really important to say, that everything we do, and I think it's kind of almost made clear through this kind of pod adventure, that everything we do is geared through relationships and geared through having fantastic relationships with our young people and making sure they feel heard, making sure they have the space to truly express, who they want to be and what's holding them back, but also fantastic relationships with our schools. I think, as any parent would note, that being a teacher is very hard work, I think, during COVID. And what our work is designed to do is kind of supplement the great work that schools do on the ground. That our work is not meant as a way to say that, schools aren't very good and, all of that. It's all meant to be a kind of supplementary way to enable them to kind of support their young people better. And that's the bit I'm particularly proud of, that over the course of these 7 years, we have retained 85-90% of the schools that we work with. And I think that's testament to, yes, the impact we make on the ground, but also testament to, look, we have some really great relationships with head teachers and teachers that have stood the test of time, and they really rely on us and they really count on us, and that really matters in the kind of field of what we're talking about, which it shows that the young people that we work with genuinely do improve their grades, genuinely do improve their confidence and their independence. So that's where we're on 2021. 16 members of staff, and 60 plus schools. And hopefully the ambition would be that we could genuinely say that we have, shifted that dial on educational disadvantage. If we can genuinely get to a space when we can say, look, we have made education fair on this in this country, and genuinely can say that, and can say that we've done that on a kind of system-wide level, I think that'd be really good. I'm really happy with that.
Yeah, and when you talk about that, and you share about, when you were that 22-year-old with slightly idealized philosophy, and it sounds like there's a huge amount of maturing that's gone on, and congratulations on the turnover and the number of schools that you're supporting, and more importantly, the number of young people whose lives that you're supporting as well. That's just incredible to hear. So I just wanted to say that. When you think out longer term and sort of step into that sort of being a visionary and charting a course, at what point do you think that we could potentially in the future have a sort of fairer system? Because you were sharing earlier that there's flaws in the educational system, which of course there will be because of the size and complexity and so many different nuances to it. But when you look out and your hope and aspiration for the UK, let's start there first off. Do you think that we could get to a fairer educational system? And if so, how long do you think that might take?
I mean, ever the optimist. Yes, I think definitely, right. And I think part of that is, I think it's very easy to bash politicians. I mean, especially in COVID, but I think it's very easy to bash people who make decisions. And I think undoubtedly, if you are the education secretary, you have got a very hard job. A school in Boston, Lincolnshire, and rural deprivation is going to be very different than a school in East London to a school in North Devon with poor transport links and all the various different communities that exist within that, from high concentrations of people of color communities to white working class to, it's very complicated, like you say, Darren. And I think that's important to be acknowledged, that there is no one size fits all solution for school improvement, that each school is its own kind of unique, wonderful challenge. And we have to kind of bear that in mind. I mean, I think kind of longer term, for me, there is something about helping. I think the answer lies with teachers fundamentally. I think the kind of political landscape of, we spent a lot of time talking about academies and local authority schools and grammar schools and that kind of stuff, but I almost feel that's a bit of a sideshow. I feel like the answer, if there was one, would be, we need to treat teachers better. We need to value the profession of teaching, which at the moment still feels very much a profession that has quite low status and is kind of, arguably looked down upon. So I think part of the answer is we need to find a way of, one, kind of rewarding teachers better. And I don't mean just pay. I mean kind of, as a society, we need to improve the status of teachers, and for people to see, how impressive the work that they are doing. And then the second part of that, I think coaching has a part to play here, which is, it's about help. And I think it's through teachers ultimately. and through young people through the work that we do. It's about empowering teachers and young people to have far more responsibility and far more autonomy to make decisions for their young people. I've never known a teacher to want their young person to do badly. What I have known though are teachers and communities and parents where they have felt stuck in a system. So they have felt like, we work with a school in Claxon, which is a kind of coastal town, where teachers will say that this is an area of real low aspiration, and the aspiration is for people to work on the pier, is for people to work there. And subconsciously that kind of gets absorbed by teachers on the ground and in the school, and they don't push their young people to think a bit further afield. And I think there's a really interesting challenge of how, and we spoke about it off air beforehand, didn't we, Darren? How do you as a teacher or as a parent encourage high expectations when it might be going against the norm of what that young person's community is like at the moment? Like, how do you in a school in Plymouth say that there is nothing wrong with your dad being a mechanic, because there isn't anything wrong with it, but I also want to inform you and prepare you for anything that you want to do. And I think that's the bit that I don't really know what the answer is, but I think that's the bit that needs support in the system. In that social mobility is quite a complicated issue, right? Because a lot of people associate social mobility with moving out or leaving your community behind, or heading for the sunny shores of London. And obviously that's not what it's about. It's about helping individuals be able to choose whatever path they want to go down, and to give them the tools to be able to do that, which at the moment I think we don't push for that challenge, and that challenge of high expectation and high aspiration enough in the school system at the moment. And I think that's in part because we don't empower our school leaders to think bold enough and to do that. But I think I think there's a lot of nuance there, and I think that's a very complicated challenge.
No, I think it's fascinating, and I'm personally fascinated with sort of whole systems and systems thinking, and pulling apart systems. So I want to get into some of the how of what you do as well, because I think I completely agree. So, and I'm hoping that as a parent myself, one of the groups of people that I've definitely, I've always had high respect for them anyway, but even more respect for teachers through the fact that I've had to work with and homeschool with my wife 3 children, 3 daughters. And it's been really challenging, like for me to have to relearn as a dad, relearn, or in some cases actually learn stuff that I didn't learn on my first trip through education, school education. It's been really fascinating to actually have to kind of get into that learner mindset and to go on the journey and to really appreciate teachers. So I think I think that's really important, and I think it's really also important that you talk about the mindset of the young person and also the teachers about self-efficacy and setting high expectations. And what we were talking about off air was that my eldest daughter, especially, who's just about to go into GCSE, complains that I've got ridiculously high expectations for her to become a doctor and all this sort of stuff. And whether she does or not, it doesn't really matter. But what I'm very consciously saying to her is, you can go as far as you want to push, and I'm not saying doctors, and I have huge respect for people that have got doctorates and doctors. I'm not saying that that's the highest form of human being there is in the world. She could go off and become an entrepreneur. She can become whatever she wants. But what I'm consciously doing as a person that didn't grow up in an environment where education was seen as a silver bullet, is setting that expectation to say, you can do it. I believe in you. And then the other thing that we've done is, and I'll use maths as an example. So, Annalisa's maths, and she won't mind me sharing, was the area that she wanted to develop the most. So we've worked with the teacher. We've also got her on somebody who's a mentor who works with her every week, once a week. And we've worked with the teachers to understand what she needs to do. And the outcome is that Annalisa just got 85% in her maths test, where she was working at a much lower level 6 months ago, 9 months ago, because we put focused attention in place. We've identified what she needs. We've listened to her, and then we've put structured learning in place. And the other thing that I always reinforce, Robin, I'd love to hear your opinion on this, is that I say to her, this is not about your teachers. Like, this is not about your teachers. This is about you having a learner mindset. It's not about being taught. It's about you being a learner. So I'd love to kind of experience that and hear your thoughts around that. And I also think, you didn't mention it, but I'm sure you are thinking about it. But I think parents are really essential to this as well. We take it really seriously in our family. And again, because of my own experience of not necessarily having parents that understood the value of education. They were wonderful, loving parents in different ways. But, that's something else that I think is really important as well. So I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on the whole system. And then also, what is it that Coach Bright actually does then?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that point around mindset is absolutely fascinating. We in our kind of coach tutor training, we talk a lot about we essentially lean heavily on Carol Dweck's growth mindset, and the idea that you don't have failure, you have kind of learning opportunities and um and that and I think that's true, right? And I think the other bit that we've missed from the discussion is grades, and people kind of go one or two ways on grades. They either go, look, grades aren't important, school of life, you can get by through grit, hard work, and grades are just a letter or a number in today's kind of money. And I think there's something important to say about that, which is I think that's true to an extent. I think grades are the currency for success in a lot of ways in today's society. And I don't mean that in terms of those who go on to Oxford are inherently better people or smarter or whatever. What I mean by that is grades allow you doors, essentially. So you if you don't get certain grades, you actually can't become a doctor or you can't choose a certain profession. So there's a degree of, unless we change that system, which it doesn't seem like we're going to change for a while, academic attainment is important. It allows you the opportunity to try different things. It allows you the opportunity to flex in different areas, and that is important to say. I think sometimes you speak to educators and they go, look, it doesn't really matter. Grades aren't the be all and end all, and commonly it comes from people who are quite middle class, and their children are probably going to do quite well anyway. So there is something important to say about that. I do feel that while they're not perfect, we do need to help young people achieve the best that they can in terms of their academic qualifications. But I think the other thing that allows young people to do, and I think that's what you're talking about, Darren, with Annalise and maths, is it helps young people develop a growth mindset and a flexibility in their thinking. And I was quite lucky through school in that I did relatively well at school, and I think I fell into the trap of getting to university and then finding it academically very challenging because I'd never failed really. I wasn't as resilient as I could have been. But I think if you can go through those processes at a young age, right, of actually trying something, not doing very well, getting back up, and whether it's through a mentor or whatever, kind of having targeted support to get better at that challenge, that is only going to prepare you for work and later life so much more. That we all know that when it comes to having great teams and being a great team member, it's people who are able to adapt under challenging circumstances. It's people who are able to see moments of crisis as opportunity and all of that. And school can play a vital role in doing that through shifting how we talk about and view failure and mindset. And then the thing I would say about parents, and COVID has really kind of shone a light on this, as you've said, Darren, of kind of having to homeschool. And I've got a few friends who have kind of young children, and the common trope is like, oh gosh, teachers work so hard and it's so difficult, and I can barely go through a Zoom meeting without someone coming in and knocking on the door and stuff like this. And you can see there are parents who have been let down by the education system and therefore do not value it. And we see that in some of our school communities in really deprived areas where parents had a really rough time at school, and for whatever reason, like their teachers didn't support them enough or whatever it was, and they feel like the system is not there for them. And that's a real shame, because undoubtedly we know, right, that a good parent is the first role model when it comes to hard work, is the first role model when it comes to expectations, is the first role model when it comes to many, many things. And undoubtedly, I think at the moment, the way we see the education system is we see kind of schools as being the great lever to kind of figure it all out. And you're right, there is a missing jigsaw here, which is the role that parents play. And I don't even think it's got to do with any technical expertise. I think it comes down to probably what we said at the start of the conversation, having courageous conversations with your children, actually sitting down with them and talking to them about how are they finding maths, what are they struggling with, what are they going to work on, how can we get better at that thing, how can we improve that thing. And that doesn't take someone who's fantastic at fractions or fantastic at simultaneous equations. It takes someone who genuinely invests kind of time and energy to talking about how school life is. And I almost think that is, if you boil down what Coach Bright does, at its heart, it's having those conversations. Yes, there is some tutoring. So our model is that we train university students as academic coaches, academic tutors to work with a young person on a one-to-one, one-to-two basis. And yes, there is some teaching there. There is some teaching around fractions and simultaneous equations, but far more, what it is a safe space for that young person to truly share how they feel about that subject and to truly share where they want to improve. Most young people want to do well. I fundamentally believe that. And if given the space to just talk about it and to think about it with no judgment, with no sense of like, look, you have to say the right things, you have to tell me the right things, with just a sense of, actually, you can express yourself how you want, and you can talk me through the challenges you have. You can also talk me through like your dreams and where you want to go. Actually, just providing those conditions, I think is half the battle, really. Yes, obviously you will then need the teacher to do the technical bit and all of that, but just providing the conditions for a young person to feel safe and secure to express how they feel about that subject, I think can be an absolute game changer. And that's kind of the focus of our work and why we lean so heavily on relationships and building rapport and doing that, because we believe that if you can create that space, then that young person will feel like they trust you, but also will actually just do most of the work themselves, as is the case with great coaching, right? The coachee will do most of the work themselves if you can just create that safe space for them to communicate and to be.
Oh, it's wonderful. So how many, you talk about, is it specifically people that are in university that come back as tutors?
And it's mainly because of the flexibility that university, so it's a logistical point of university students are kind of freer, but also because right kind of early doors in 2014, we wanted to create a model that was scalable, that wasn't just going to impact the 10 pupils in Elephant and Castle. It did have the capacity to reach as many young people's lives as possible. But then two, we also wanted to build in this idea of a relatable role model, that the young people that were being supported were only supported by people who were only 2, 3, 4 years ahead in their own education journey. And there's something really fascinating to me about that, which is when you see a Coach Bright program happen for the first time, you have two sets of people, right? You have the university student tutors and coaches who have been trained, gone through safeguarding, all of that. And then you also have the pupils who have applied and been selected and have gone on the program. And before they meet, they both share the same characteristic, which is they're both terrified, essentially. They're both nervous of the other one. So you've got this young person who's scared about how this 19-year-old or 20-year-old might think of them, and and all of that. And then you've also got this 19, 20-year-old on the other side who's like, oh, I've never been back to school, and actually, will I be able to communicate with them? And I think there's this wonderful moment when they meet in the middle, and you realize, or they realize, better yet, there's nothing that special about a university student, and there's nothing that scary about a school pupil. And they build genuine human to human connections over just who they are and what they care about. And there's something magical about that, about the work that we do, which is it's about bridging these two communities that would never meet, and then very quickly for them to realize that, everyone is here to, in aid of supporting a young person to be better, and all of that, and actually just providing those conditions and that space for that to happen. Real magic can come from it. Real magic of pupils who have done really badly in maths suddenly kind of improve in their engagement. Real magic in people sharing that they've got challenges because their friends always talk in class. Half of the academic stuff is half the reason someone's struggling academically isn't the academic stuff, right? It's I've like surrounded myself with the wrong group of friends, or oh, I feel like my teacher picks on me, and then you kind of unpack that a bit, and creating that space where they can do that is part of the challenge, I think.
Oh, wonderful. And so do the university sorry, what do you call them? Not tutors. So the university tutors, so do they get paid, or is it a contributor role, so a gifting role?
It's a gifting role, and I think that again is an interesting area. So all our university student tutors, coaches are volunteers, and we have 850 this academic year. And because our social purpose is so heavily geared towards making social mobility a reality, getting rid of the kind of postcode lottery that exists in society at the moment, it therefore attracts a certain type of individual, right? It attracts a certain type of themselves, young person who wants to make education fairer, who is deeply passionate about doing that. And I think the wonderful thing for us is that they obviously gift their time, and what we can offer them back is this wonderful experience with a young person and the ability to make impact with a young person. But also for us, we play a part in helping their kind of career journey, if you like. So they get a kind of leadership accreditation from an external training body that we provide through the process. And it was really exciting to see that a lot of the tutors we work with end up becoming teachers themselves, or end up working in the social sector, supporting kind of other kind of vulnerable groups and kind of disadvantaged groups. And that's a real joy of our program that we probably don't spend a lot of time talking about, is the effect we have on our university student cohort as well, is that they go on to do wonderful things. And part of that is their ability to learn that initial coach training, that, like we said at the start, that initial kind of communication training. You hear in the news all the time about millennials not being able to communicate or to work in teams. And the joy of coaching, obviously, is that I think that kind of really flips that on its head, that you're training university students in how to self-reflect and self-analyze and to do that.
No, wonderful. So so if I get the maths right, so you're supporting 2,000 children, so they support 2 to 3 people, young people each. Is that roughly about right?
Yeah, roughly. We also, the other thing I haven't mentioned is that we have a peer-to-peer program. So we have an in-school program where year 12s coach year 10s, for example, or sometimes it's younger, kind of year 11s coaching kind of year 8s, which again is that same principle of kind of building relationships, creating a kind of coaching program. But the beauty of that one is that it's in-house. So you're really shaping the culture of that school. So you're encouraging that school to think about how they can build a coaching community and a coaching culture in-house. And I think, at our best, the university student program also does that. It creates this culture that's slightly different, perhaps, than what kind of that school community is used to. But definitely that peer-to-peer program does that too. And that's been a wonderful kind of byproduct of our, it almost wasn't planned, Darren, really. It came about because there were some schools that were logistically difficult to reach. And then school leaders were like, oh, why don't we use year 12s instead of university students? And that's how it kind of accidentally came about. But it's been a fantastic feature of our work now, because it's got that internal culture building piece that we never really thought about.
I absolutely love it. So I sort of story I don't really share, but before Mo, way before Mo, so way back in 2004, I think 2003-4, when I first trained as a coach, I went back to my school that I went to, my sort of senior school, and for 3 years I was a coach that worked with young people. Started off with 6 young people, and then I ended up working with the entire sixth form. And one of the projects that we got going, and I think it probably still goes on, was from the sixth forms identified it, was that they felt that the local community didn't trust the school. The reputation of the school wasn't fantastic in the local area. So what they did was they went out to they went out to the local shops and went and spoke to them all and said, look, actually we've got this project where we want to support what's called Demeltia House, which is basically a home for kids that are sort of coming to the end of their life as children. And they went and got loads and loads of presents from the local community, and they got hundreds of presents. And what was so wonderful was that it came from the sixth formers. They went out and did it. Then they enrolled the whole school in it as well. They got the whole school to start bringing presents in as well. But they also got the local community and they got the police in and stuff like that. And it had a really positive impact on the way that school was seen, and also their relationship with the police, which was one of the community groups they were really worried about in the local shops. And it had a real positive impact. And that talks to what you're talking about, this self-empowerment, this actually we could do something here to shape it. So I love that. And I love the sense that you're bringing the coaching culture into schools. So why don't you share some of the 7-8 years of data now? And I know that you'll be gathering the data, and I see you do an annual report every year. So what are some of the kind of positives that you're starting to see when you work with a school?
And just quickly going back on that story, Dan, I didn't know that about you. That's absolutely fascinating, and I think that's again speaks to God. I mean, young people are amazing, right? When you work with them, that if you trust them and give them the tools to do stuff, they can do such fantastic things. And I think that point around building that relationship with the police community, I think just amazing that if you can give them the tools to and the space to do that incredible. And in terms of data, I think the one that we're particularly proud of is so we like to measure kind of how our Coach Bright pupils do in relation to grades, to confidence, to independence. And in relation to grades, the one that we're particularly proud of is that young people who come on the Coach Bright program from disadvantaged backgrounds every year tend to outperform those who are also from disadvantaged backgrounds but not on Coach Bright, and also those that are just not on Coach Bright generally. So I think by last count we found that pupils on Coach Bright improved 0.4 of a grade more than those not on Coach Bright, essentially in the kind of same given time period, which is about a term and a bit. Which I think really flags to us that the work that we're doing isn't just a fluffy conversation. It's not just a case of people meeting and having interesting conversations. That actually leads to tangible results, and in some cases tangible results that then can really shift a young person's direction and path. So we've had many of our young people kind of go on to be the first in their family to go to university, or they're first in their family to go on to certain types of industry. And the one that I always share is this wonderful pupil called Esther, who I met when she was 17, and she was absolutely charismatic and bouncing up and down the corridors when she was at school. But she really found school life quite difficult. She wasn't geared academically. She just found it very challenging. And she had an English coach with her, and invariably, like a lot of the conversation, while it was on English, also delved into, I just find doing homework really challenging. I just find like concentrating on essay writing really difficult. And she went through that whole process, and it was amazing to find that after year 13, she was the first in her family to go to the University of Manchester. She was from South London originally, first in her family to go to Manchester actually as well. And now she has actually come through the other side of that, and she has graduated, and she's actually becoming a social entrepreneur, setting up an empathy museum, which is fascinating. And that's amazing, because that's just one example of like the many stories that we don't even do justice in capturing enough of, really. I mean, that's come about because I played a part in kind of supporting Esther in that kind of pilot program, but there are so many more kind of stories like that. So so that kind of that impact of supporting young people kind of really is that the dream and highlight of the work really. And obviously we kind of capture kind of smaller um data surveys around pupils saying they've become more confident, pupils saying they've become more independent and resilient through the program, which is fantastic to see. But it's, stories like Esther, when you hear about them, or you see them get back in touch. I'm almost like one of those old teachers, Darren, when you get an occasional email out the blue and someone going, "Oh yes, did you know I'm doing this?" And you're like, "Oh, how wonderful!" And it always reminds me that I should do that to my teachers, and get other people to do that too. Because I think that's so fantastic to see when people are at a law firm or becoming a doctor or whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, I was intrigued with that. So, I mean, have you got a platform that you use? How do you stay in contact with people?
This is an area of work that we're not there yet on, essentially. So we're starting to develop. We're at the moment using an interim solution of creating LinkedIn groups where we invite our alumni to join and to be a part of. One of our challenges is a very pragmatic one around kind of GDPR and young people and getting their kind of data permissions and things like that. So far, a lot of it um, has been through those LinkedIn groups and also through our relationships with schools, so that we can kind of track where that young person has kind of gotten onto. But I think that's one of the big areas for us to think about moving forward. Is that, fair enough, when we started, when there were 20, 30 pupils a year, we're now talking about 2,000 pupils, 3,000 pupils each year. And there's a challenge there of how do we, one, support them when they finish the program, similar to the Mo community, right? It's not just a course, it's a community. How do we build that into our alumni program? How do we then get people like Esther to come back to give talks, to come back to deliver workshops? Because that's ultimately what it's all about. It's not about the Coach Bright team, high on above delivering work. It's building this community. And I think that's the next challenge for us, really, is how do we build that into our model. So I'll be giving you a call many a time, Darren, I imagine, over the next few years.
Yeah, no, it's I've been talking to various different platform providers, and what I find, I mean, obviously Mo's in a different financial position to you. It's just finding one that's got the right financial structure for us. When I put my AC hat on, we've invested in a platform. We're just about to launch it in the next couple of months. We signed it 3 weeks ago, which plays into our kind of membership management solution. But again, it's really costly. That's the reality of it. So you have to have a certain level of revenue in order to do it. So I don't have the solution at the moment. So when you come across one and a platform that can scale with you, I think that would be great. And yeah, I mean, when I listen to this, Robin, I think there's a lifetime relationship that you can create with people. And it's again to sort of from a Mo perspective, we never really gave consideration to that community part when we started out, and now I'm much more conscious of it. So there's a whole load of people that have just floated away from Mo, and we might never hear from them again. And some people never want to hear from us again for whatever reasons. That's all good. But what I'd love to have is actually a way to kind of stay in connection, so that we can, as I shared with you at the very beginning of this, is just celebrate the stories of people like yourself that have had some sort of interaction with Mo and have benefited from it or have contributed to it, and have now gone on to create incredible organizations that are having real impact. So definitely on the lookout for that. So very happy to kind of keep that conversation going. So let us know when you find the next thing. The when you look at what you're doing, so in terms of the funding model, if I've understood it rightly, at the moment it's funded directly through schools. So head teachers and deputy heads and teachers are really essential to you. Is that right? So that's how it's funded, through individual schools?
Correct. Yes, absolutely. So our entire model and our entire income has been through school sales, and actually university sales. So we also work with universities in the local area too, and that was really important early doors for me personally. That as a founder, I wanted our work to be driven from a place of, look, we need to make impact and we need to prove that the work is good and that we can be self-sustaining just on the back of essentially kind of customer sales. And it happens that our customer in this case is the head teacher. And that was really important, because I've seen that in the past, many kind of charities and social enterprises have fallen foul of kind of going big on grant funding and donations early doors, and then kind of not maintaining that quality and then essentially being reliant on constantly grant funding. Having said that, we are actually becoming a charity, and I think that's important to say, and that's mainly because I think hopefully it's been evident through this through the podcast that our work is for a charitable purpose and is for a social purpose at its heart. And there was something really important to me about really enshrining that kind of legally in the organization to make sure that, you know, if I was to ever leave or whatever, that that kind of support for disadvantaged young people would kind of sit at the heart of what we do. And the other part is that we probably are missing a trick of not realizing certain kind of grant funding, fundraising kind of ambitions that we can. But regardless of that, our model will always be geared from a kind of quality first, revenue kind of first kind of way of thinking. And because I think for us, what that does is that it enables us to really prioritize the quality of our programs first and foremost, and not get distracted by kind of other avenues that actually having to be held accountable each year by the school, and for them to go, look, if it's good, we'll do it again. If it's not so good, we won't do it again. That has enabled us to really build in. We have to deliver the best possible outcomes for our young people, which obviously we would want to do anyway on a philosophical level. But because it's been grounded in the way that our model works, it really focuses the attention for not just me, but, you know, our entire kind of staff team and volunteering team as well, that, you know, delivering good work will mean kind of more work in the future, and that really matters.
No, that's wonderful, and I love it. Obviously, you know, as you know, the way that Mo's structured is sort of that purposeful entrepreneurship, as I would call it. So it's kind of got an entrepreneurial commercial sense, but actually everything goes back into the organization, and it has to wash its face. You know, it has to for it to grow. It has to do it based off adding value to that people are willing to pay. And obviously, in our model, we've got the two doors. So some people get gifted, and some people make a contribution. You know, so that I love that. I think that's really, really fantastic. So, in terms of the charitable aspect, so you're going to keep the social, you know, the social vehicle, and you're also going to have the charitable vehicle, or are you going to shift it over to a sort of charitable vehicle?
Yeah, it will just be, we will just have one charitable vehicle, a CIO.
Yeah.
And but I think ultimately the place we want to get to, Darren, is similar to Mo, a kind of two doors approach. So we would have the majority of schools paying for the service, and then there might be community work with certain schools that can't afford it that we would then, you know, offer on a subsidy basis or even pro bono basis. And that's probably the stage we want to get to, kind of longer term. And I think that two doors sounds really catchy. Might steal that. I think that sounds good.
Yeah, well, it's we stole it. Well, so Simon Hampel is also on this podcast. You'll hear Simon's story. I think you'll really enjoy it if you've not met Simon. So he was the CEO of Right to Sight, which gave Sight back to 20 odd thousand people in his last year, and they had the two doors. And I met Simon as I was thinking about Mo in 2010, and just fell in love with Simon and said, "Look, I'm going to create this organisation, and I'd love to take the two door philosophy and use it at the heart of the organisation." And you know, he's still a trustee. You know, long term be a trustee. So it comes from Right to Sight. So don't worry, you're not stealing it from Mo. We've absolutely borrowed it because we think it's such a wonderful concept. I mean, really, honestly, it's just so fabulous to hear what you're doing, and it's great. So you're at 2% at the moment, I think, in terms of the schools, roughly. Ambition to 10%. What about going beyond you know, the English shores, the UK shores? Is there ambitions to kind of look more globally?
I think I'd have to consult you on that, Darren. I think maybe ultimately, I think there's something interesting for me about, you really need to understand the culture of the place that you're working in to be able to do good work. And I think that's what we've grappled with on a much lower end kind of regional level, that schools in the Southwest are vastly different than schools in London. You know, one has urban deprivation challenges, another has rural deprivation, and those are vastly different. That a school in North Devon will have really difficult transport links. The teachers that will be there will be lifers, essentially, will be there for kind of decades and decades, while a school in London might have the same free school meal statistic, which we use to measure poverty in this country in education. But the teachers will leave after every 3-4 years. It's quite a young staff force. The pupils might actually be far more aspirational because they're next door to the London Eye and whatever. So there is something fascinating to me there about we've spent a lot of time trying to understand the individual culture of the places that we work. So any move abroad, we would have to spend time kind of understanding that international context before I think I would feel certain or comfortable that our work would be applicable. Having said that, I think undoubtedly coaching is going to become ever more present in the way we think about education, and arguably it already is, right? That like parents intuitively do it, good teachers intuitively do it, but increasingly I think you'll see a lot of head teachers now will have coaches, will have executive coaches who work with them, just like any leadership coach really with a CEO. But increasingly I think we will see it go further down the school system and all the way down to pupils, which is where Coach Bright is, right? That we'll ultimately get to a stage, I think, where more schools are run with a coaching lens, where you really put responsibility in the hands of the young people. You really trust them to make the right decisions, and we really kind of build that into the system. And that's not a UK thing. I think that is going to be an increasingly kind of global movement.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with you. And I think, as you know, I was very privileged to be mentored by Sir John Whitmore. I was very close to John. And, I always feel like myself and Catherine and Alex, from the AC and the team in Mo, we sort of carry that torch forwards, because John always said to us, we would have won when we don't talk about coaching anymore. So, 7.5 billion, 7.8 billion people on the planet. I think there's a huge amount to do. And I think from if you want me to go sort of deeper, sort of more philosophical, is that I think we have to do it, because I see coaching raises awareness and consciousness, and hopefully it will give the human tribe the opportunity to actually look after this planet, because we really do need to kind of make some shifts. And I think we can do that by gently asking questions and being a great witness and a friend and a challenger to people. And I think if we can start with young people and give young people, and I think a lot of young people have got these. When I think about my daughters, they're global in mindset. They live in a global world. They're connected and interconnected already. And they've got friends all over the world because of the way that they interact socially, which I just, is so fascinating to me. My friendship group when I grew up was the council estate, my local friends who typically lived one door next to me and two doors just opposite me. And that was my friendship group. Now kids are interconnected, which is, I think, really fascinating. So yeah, and I do agree with you in terms of understanding the context, and schools are schools. Education is education. I think that's the other thing, isn't it? It's just there are differences that I'm hearing from you, and I would listen to you with all your depth of experience. And ultimately, we're talking about young people and how we help them develop and grow and believe in themselves. So, sounds like you've put a really fantastic hack in place for that. Looking at yourself, so we've looked at Coach Bright, we've looked at the community, and it's really wonderful to hear that complex system and community that you're interacting with. When you think about yourself, and you go back and think about that 22-year-old, and now think of yourself as that 30-year-old who I think you just shared, you're about to, or you're getting engaged. What are some of the life lessons and entrepreneurial lessons that you've gathered?
Yes, soon to be 30, Darren, in August.
Sorry to do that to you, Robin. I mean, I know it's a wonderful, terrible moment in life, turning 30, leaving your 20s behind.
I think, and it's a quote that I've been thinking about throughout this podcast, actually. It's one that if any team members hear this, they'll be like, "Oh, he keeps on banging on about this one," which is it's from Martin Luther King, and he says the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. And something fascinating there, because a lot of people think that means there's an inevitability that the world is just going to become more just. The arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. But actually what Dr. King was saying has often been misquoted, is that he he means you have to bend it towards justice. You have to actively do something to push towards the thing you want to see. And if there was any kind of lesson to be learned from, Coach Bright and the work that I've done is there is something about you can't wait, and I think about that quite a lot. That if I hadn't have done Coach Bright, would someone else have done a coaching intervention in schools? And I think the honest answer is probably not. Is actually we'd just be where we are, and that's the real driver for me. Is that it's not that, and my brother thinks slightly differently on entrepreneurship. He's very much of the opinion that you can't tell people stuff. If you tell them, then they'll steal it and do that, or uh or it'll just happen anyway. And I don't really believe that. I believe that if you really are passionate about something and you really think you've got a solution for something, you need to, and you care about it, you need to be the one to put it out into the world. Because if you don't do it, it's actually far more likely it just won't happen. No one else will do it. So there's a degree of, you just have to go for it. And I think that's quite an interesting, freeing sensation when you think about it. And then I think the really obvious one for me, and it holds true as much today as it did, in 2014, is you absolutely just have to surround yourself with much better people than you, really. And that's true of you, Darren. I remember us having conversations all the way dating back to 2015, 16, when you kind of subconsciously coached me. And I remember you mentioning that, oh, the thing that you have, Robin, is vision. And I think that's great. And with that vision comes surrounding yourself with people who can help kind of, one, execute that, but also two, like, collaborate and improve on that vision. And I think I'm really lucky to say that I've got a fantastic team with people that are far more compassionate than me, far more organized, far more able to build relationships. And also in my kind of wider community, that there are kind of mentors and advisors and supporters who, I think, just out of sheer goodwill, are happy to help, and happy to make introductions, and happy to play a part in making Coach Bright a success and making education fairer. And I think that's the lesson that I feel when speaking to any kind of young or new entrepreneur I can give is, if the more people you tell, the more people can get on board and can help out, really. That there's nothing wrong with sharing even just a nugget of the idea. It will never be perfect, and it will never feel like you've come to the finished solution. Like, still now 7 years on, like, am I ever satisfied with where we are? Probably not. My partner and I are religiously watch the Hamilton musical, which some people know, and there's a line in there that goes like, "Will you ever be satisfied?" And I don't ever feel satisfied with Coach, but I always feel like we can do more, and we can be better, and something can be improved. But I think if you ever let that act as a barrier to communication, as a barrier to putting it out there, I think that's the bit where that's a real shame. Because really, an imperfect idea is fantastic, because it allows others to come in and collaborate and be creative, and to make it even better. And I think that's something that hopefully I've kind of embodied, even as Coach Bright has grown, that we want to seek as much input and be humble and getting as much opinion as possible from as many different people. So the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, but you have to do the bending, I think. So, you really do that. And then also putting yourself out there and surrounding yourself with better people who will drive the idea in far better ways forward than you could do just individually.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, I really 100% sign up to that. I really do, and I love that. I've heard that quote before, but I love the way that you've brought that to life further. And I think, yeah, just to sort of share my own take on what you were sharing around an idea. I think there's millions, billions of ideas every single day of our lives, and actually, I don't think you need to have a scarcity mindset about it, because I think what it takes to actually create a business is so much energy and good fortune and relationships and mentors, and just sheer darn hard work, that for the vast majority of people it's like, actually, that's not for me. I've heard it quoted as 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. And you were sharing at the very beginning of this about when you run a small business, it's you eat, sleep, and breathe it. Your parents is a great example of that, and that's quite a price to pay. And other people don't. People who haven't got the natural sort of entrepreneur or business mindset and beliefs, don't want to do that. So I've never had a sense of scarcity around sharing ideas, and I've got a really simple reason for that: is that the idea I share with you today, I'll improve in 1 minute's time. And it's really difficult to keep up when you've got somebody that thinks like that. And the other quote that came to me as I was listening to you is, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So, we need a world where people are doing good stuff and doing it in what I call high fidelity systems. So these highly networked systems of deep collaboration. And we need more of that. So keep doing what you're doing, and hopefully others will start to follow and start to improve, and then that'll inspire you and your team to kind of push on forwards. And then finally, completely agree with you. It's about, as the founder of an organization, that humility, that focus on excellence and mastery. And it really isn't about you. Couldn't agree with you more. It's always about that team of people. They're the people that are so critical. They're the ones that really take it forwards often. Because most of us founders have got huge amounts of fundamental flaws as well as wonderful strengths. So good to focus on other people's strengths. I've really loved our conversation. It's been really lovely to reconnect with you. So are there any hopes, wishes, or any call outs for anyone who might happen to come across this pod adventure and go, oh, Robin sounds like an amazing person? How do they connect with you? Anyone that you'd specifically like to kind of speak to or be connected to in terms of job roles? Just, your opportunity to kind of put a bit of a call out to the Mo community.
So first off, the team would completely massacre me if I hadn't mentioned this. So our Twitter and Instagram is at CoachBrightUK. So please do follow us there. And we are actually, very luckily, during COVID, we are hiring. So if anyone is interested in what we do and also happens to be based in the Southwest, we're hiring for a primary program officer to lead a lot of our primary work in the Southwest. And also always on the hunt for volunteers who care about making education fairer, who want to try and take a coaching approach to education. So if that's of any interest, please do just have a look on our website at coachbright.org. And of course, like happy to share and reach out and talk to anyone if anyone was thinking about being a social entrepreneur and all the kind of trials and tribulations with that. As Darren mentioned, I think it can be quite a all-consuming and lonely journey. So if anyone's wants to check in and have a chat, like I would love to do that too. So please do reach out too.
Wonderful. And I'll put a plug in for you. If there's anyone that's related to teachers and schools where, you've got areas of deprivation or, young people that are coming from difficult backgrounds, then Robin sounds like your man to get in contact with, and Robin and his team. Robin, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom and sharing your insights and story. And it's so wonderful to kind of reconnect with you and to kind of hear what you and the team are creating and the benefits and the stories it's creating in young people's lives. So well done to you and all the team.
Thanks, Darren. Really appreciate being on. And thank you for asking me. Loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Wonderful. Take care.
Well, what an inspiring conversation. That was really, really fantastic to hear, and so proud we are here at Mo of one of our graduates, of all of our graduates, but of Robin in particular, who's made such an astounding impact on the lives of so many others. A particular highlight for me was the way that he described the Martin Luther King quote. I don't think I've ever heard it described that way, and he's so right. We have to do the bending. We have to step up and make a change, because if we don't, who else is going to? Really, really fantastic points raised. If you would like to know a little bit more about Coach Bright, perhaps you're a parent or a teacher or have some connection to a school, you can get in touch with them at Coach Bright UK. You can also find them online at coachbright.org. That's Coach, COACH, BRIGHT. You can also find the information in the description below this podcast. If you happen to be a Mo graduate that's listening and you'd like to be featured on the podcast, please get in touch with me at maisie@mofoundation.com. That's MAISIE at mofoundation.com, and we can set up a time to delve into your story. We hope that you've enjoyed listening today, and we look forward to seeing you here on the next one. Bye for now. Now, this is a message for anybody who thinks that life coaching might be the right calling for you, but you're not sure how to attract new clients. So on the 17th of April, we will be having our next Mo Digital Academy. Keely Vuong White, the founder of Kia Ora Coaching, is going to be talking to us about how to attract clients as a new life coach, a 90-minute long introduction to marketing. Now, she's had a fantastic life and has spent 15 years in international corporate marketing and has also learned a thing or two about setting up a business. And she's also done her coaching with the Mo Foundation. So she's going to be running a fantastic workshop. We hope to see you there. If you're interested and you'd like to register, then please find more information on our website. That's mofoundation.com/calendar. Thanks so much, and we will see you there.